welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and today I am joined by my illustrious colleague. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Kay, and I'm one of the Reader Services librarians here at the Syosset Public Library. So I'm in charge of recommending books to you and making sure you get the book you want when you come through the doors.
Yes. And we are here with two very special guests today who are here to talk about a gorgeous graphic novel. The color palette alone was just like, oh, soothed my senses and made it feel like a warm summer day. And then the story chilled me to the bone. So let's introduce our guests. Could I ask you to introduce yourselves and your work, please?
Well, my name's Owen King, and I am an author and a screenwriter. And my most recent book before this was The Curator, and I co-wrote this with my friend Jesse Kellerman. And we're in different places. I'm in New York, and Jesse, where are you?
I'm out in Northern California. I'm Jesse Kellerman. I, like Owen, am an author and apparently now a comic book and graphic novelist as well. And I think that little moment where we each tried to defer to the other one tells you everything you need to know about our collaboration.
We do that too.
Yes, we do. Yeah. Let's start with a question about the origins of your collaboration. How did you come to work together, and what made this story the object of that collaboration?
Well, Owen and I have been friends for over 20 years at this point. We met when we were both living in New York. We each had a few glorious child-free years living in Manhattan, which was really fun. And we connected and became buddies. It was sort of it was the early days of the internet when you could reach out to somebody and make that connection without it being creepy. And so we were able to connect over the internet, and we've just been friends ever since. And we've both always been busy with our respective individual projects. And about 3-4 years ago, I should say, we're in different places. We haven't physically seen each other in person in a long, long time now. It's been well over a decade. And but we email and text and chat and schmooze, and we thought, wouldn't it be fun to do something together? And I'll let Owen talk about the immediate inspiration.
Yeah, I actually think it was way back in 2018 or 2019. I was living in California, working in a writer's room. And it was a very strange time because I was living in the Universal City Walk Hotel by myself, and I'd ride up and down in the elevator with like Vin Diesel leaping out of a fireball on the inside, and I felt very alienated, and part of it was that Los Angeles was such a strange place to me, and I would do things like drive home on the 405 and the hillsides would be on fire because that was just sort of normal at the time. There'd be like these little brush fires everywhere, and everybody would just be continuing on their way, and there was just a sense of like, where are the neighborhoods? And there was a strangeness, but it was also the most beautiful place I've ever lived. And I would go to the beach, and it was sunny every day, and everybody was striving really hard. And I called Jesse one night, and I was talking to him about my experiences in this beautiful, mysterious, intimidating city. And he said, well, let's write something about that. And we just started spitballing, and we came up with the idea of these two men who look just alike. And one is at the bottom and one is at the top. And the one on the bottom is a rideshare driver. And he's got a lot of problems in his life. He's estranged from his family. He's got money problems, and he's not sure he's going to make it. And then the guy that he looks just like is a self-help guru who's publishing books and doing seminars and is at the top of society. He's an advisor to some of the richest people in the world, and everything is at his fingertips. And he's preaches a very aggressive gospel. And Jesse and I were talking about we came up with these two characters, and then we had them meet and thought, well, what would be an interesting thing to happen? And without giving too much away, I think we can tell you that the one guy gets to take the other guy's place, and it's not in a nice way.
Yeah.
And we went from there.
That was one of the things I kind of really enjoyed when I read the graphic novel was I liked the double entendre of the title. Like that to me, I thought was very clever and fun. When did that like come about? Did you think of like the title first, or was it like the two guys popped in and then boom, title?
That is a good question. I don't remember which exactly came first. I mean, I think the concept of self-help, right? We're sort of living in a moment where because of the internet and Instagram and TikTok, you have a ton of these people sort of preaching their individual systems for self-improvement. And even though the idea of self-improvement is this really old American ideal going all the way back to Poor Richard's Almanac or whatever, and Dale Carnegie and Norman Vincent, what's his
Peele.
name? Peele, right?
Yep.
So that sort of ethos has always been around, but I think there's been something really poisonous about the way really terrible and toxic ideas have been given fertile ground to breed in because of the way we communicate these days. So I think that we were sort of aware of that and thinking about that, and obviously, as you say, it's a pun on what the characters decide to do. So
Yeah, he decides to help himself.
exactly right. It's all fun and games until somebody starts helping themselves at your expense, right? So.
Right.
Yeah. I'm really interested in that sort of critique of the wellness, the self-help guru kind of culture. 'Cause I grew up in like the late 80s and the 90s, and it seemed like that stuff was everywhere at the time. And you're right that there is something universal about it. Like there have always been these sort of people who have wanted to sort of use this sort of philosophy to take advantage of people. But Darren Hart also feels very contemporary and of the moment in a lot of ways too. So can you talk about shaping him and let's say his ideology?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in the comic book, and there's a second series that brings the story around, and so you learn a little bit more about him in that. But what we wanted to get across with Darren and his form of self-help is his big slogan is only you can help you. And he is preaching a very aggressive idea that you're looking out for you, you're examining the people around you to see what they can do for you and what their value to you is. And that's how you are making your program in life to get ahead. And I think like pretty much all self-help programs, it can work for some people, and that's why he's successful, is because there's people that have used his method and it has worked for them. And by contrast, our other protagonist, or really our protagonist, I think Darren is sort of an anti-hero in the story. Jerry is approaching the idea of helping people in a different kind of way. He is a con artist and a grifter, you come to find out, and he tries to help people not by firing them up or tearing them down, but by sort of massaging them or making them feel better about stuff or charming them. And that's a contrast in the self-help approach, even though the one guy is pretending to be the other.
He's a grifter who drives for Drifter.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thought that was clever when I read it too. Yeah,
Great.
thanks.
Yeah.
I actually have a really interesting question. I was really curious about what brought the two of you to comics. We know that you guys have written a bunch of other stories before this, a lot of collaborations with other authors. And Owen, you said before that you've done like screenwriting and stuff. Why comics now?
Why don't you take this one, Jesse?
Well, Owen has experience writing comics. This was not his first comic, and it was actually his idea to do this in a comic form. When we were sort of bouncing the idea around, we thought, do we want to do this as a feature? Do we want to do this as TV? And I think we agreed that comics was sort of an exciting, relatively low impact way to get this project done, because you don't need to raise a budget of $100 million to make a comic book. And we really wanted to see the thing come to life. And I've read many comics. I grew up reading comics. I've read many graphic novels, but I'd never written for one before. And what I discovered as I learned from Owen about the form and learned from our editor is that there's a lot of similarities here between this format and not just screenwriting, which I have a little bit of experience with, but also writing for the theater, which is actually what I'm trained to do. I'm a playwright by training. So what that means is you're thinking in a few ways that are different from when you're writing a novel, right? So the first is you're thinking collaboratively. You never look at what you're writing as the end product. It's a skeleton that is there really to enable the artist to realize the vision. And likewise, when you're writing a play, you are not looking at this as an end in itself. It's a text that then becomes something visual. So to think about it that way, to think visually, to do less if you can, right? The goal is actually in any given panel, and this holds for the screen and this holds for the stage, to have the characters speak as few words as possible, only what is necessary in order to convey the idea, and that the majority of the meaning is conveyed visually and through physical intention. And I think that that gave me, in making the transition, a mild advantage over someone who's just used to writing prose, where I think there's this impulse to want to fill up the panel with words and to overwrite everything. But I get excited by the idea of squeezing out as much possible. And if I can do it with one word or even no words, just by describing the panel, letting the art really take over, that's very exciting to me. So it was a learning process for me, but I learned a tremendous amount from Owen.
And I think that we both learned a lot from our editor and our artist, Marianna Ignazzi, who is fabulous, talented young artist living in Rome. And she always does more with a panel than we expect her to. And so that almost always allows us to edit down whatever we had in there.
Yeah, I think Jen and I were both really wowed by her art style. And Jen mentioned the color earlier. I think that was one of the first things I said when we got the arc for it. I turned to Jen and I was like, it's so bright and vibrant and very beautifully illustrated. Did you guys get to choose your artist for this, or did Image kind of provide you? I'm not really sure how it works, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, we knew that we wanted a certain kind of look. We wanted it to be a California noir in a cinematic way. So we were thinking of things like the Elliot Gould Long Goodbye, or the Big Lebowski, or To Live and Die in LA, these kind of Los Angeles movies where there's a lot of sky and there's a lot of color and there's just a pop to the visuals. And so, and we wanted there to be some humor in the faces and very expressive people, because it's a slightly surreal world, right? That these people are inhabiting. And so Chris Ryle, our editor, who's edited a million comic books, he's just a genius, so knowledgeable about comic books. He gave us samples from a whole bunch of different artists that he thought we might be able to get. And Mariana's one that jumped way out, and her colorist, Fabiana, whose last name I'm blanking on, is also amazing. And, I don't know if Fabiana's been to California. I know Mariana hasn't, but they understood what we wanted.
One thing, you mentioned this already, but we really wanted there to be, and this is sort of traditional with Southern California noir, this contrast between the warmth and the brightness of the visual environment and the darkness of the human element of the story, right? As you say, you want the actions and the words to chill you to the bone, right? And having grown up in LA, it's an industry town, and it's a place that's built on fantasy and delusion and lies, and so that's one of the reasons it's been traditionally such a great setting for noir. I will say, interestingly, so we had this really interesting back and forth with Mariana and Fabiana to a lesser extent about the visuals, and even though, as far as I know, Maria's never been to Los Angeles. We would send her like photos, like Google image photos, like this is what this intersection looks like. But her points of reference, she had no points of reference other than what we were sending her. She really did a magnificent job of imagining the world out. One thing that was interesting to see when the colors went in is I think, Rome and LA are sort of like on the same line. And like the color of the light in both places is actually very similar. Like if you
Yeah.
go to the Mediterranean, it's this warm, sort of orangey, oversaturated palette quality to the light that exists in Southern California as well. And she was really able to transpose that and put the shape of Los Angeles around it.
Well, I know Jen's been to Rome,
Yes, yeah.
and I've been to California.
Between the two,
Yeah.
yes, I can validate that.
I agree. When I was reading it, I was like, I feel like I've been on this road. Because I drove from San Diego to LA and then back. And so I was like, I feel like I've driven past like this exact stretch of land and this part of the
Yeah.
desert. And I've seen all these houses. And so yeah, she really did a really good job translating,
Yeah.
and making it like feel like we were in California while you were reading it.
Yeah. And as you were both talking before, it really got me thinking about how well noir goes with comics, like as a medium, because like with noir, you're always sort of like you have the surface and then what is below the surface, and you have like here you have like the sunny visuals, and then you have like the intrigue and the betrayals and just like the sort of, random happenstances of like crappy human behavior that you get occasionally contrasting with that like the images bring the California and then the text brings the noir like
Exactly. Yeah, that's was one of the reasons why we thought it would fit with the medium. And there's lots of crime comic books out, even though that's not, it's obviously not in the mainstream of the comic book world, but it's a genre there. So we thought it would fit.
I think I've been seeing a lot more crime and noir comics coming about, and they're republishing a lot these days too. I do a lot of the ordering for the comics for the library. So like I take note of like, oh, what's popular right now and like what goes out and stuff. And so yeah, I think a couple months ago they re-released, I don't remember who it was. I'm sorry, I'm ill prepared for this, but they've been re-releasing a lot of like old noir comics. I think they did a Dick Tracy recently, and
yes,
it's becoming a new thing again. So it's very interesting to see what comes out.
I'd love if we could talk a little bit more about, let's say, the family dynamics at work in this story. We haven't talked as much about Jerry yet as we have about Darren, but I'd love if you could talk about crafting him and his sort of like his immediate inner circle, let's say. He's like a very iconic noir protagonist in some ways, but I also feel like he subverts it in some very interesting ways too. So could you talk about him a little bit?
Sure. He, well, I think, again, without giving too much away, I mean, one of the things that we tried to set up is the idea that Jerry has a lot of secrets and that he's not exactly who he appears to be when we first meet him. And he is pretty morally leveraged in a bunch of different ways. And he is a little bit of that classic noir loser character. This guy who's got, his ledger is so full of debts and broken promises, but he's got one more shot to try to clear it all. And that's what he's going to try to do. And so he's got a bunch of things chasing after him that I won't give away, but they're all pretty threatening. And then on top of that, he's got his wife Michelle, with whom he used to run grifts, and she's pretty mad at him. And he's got a young daughter who idolizes him in a way that, especially as the story is developing in the later issues, is maybe not totally healthy because she's learning to be a grifter like he is, which is adorable but awful. And so that, I would say, is the gist of Jerry and the context of where we meet him. Anything to add, Jesse?
So yeah, no, that pretty much sums it up. I think the one thing I would throw on is something you and I have talked about a lot, which is Jerry and his wife, as I mentioned, used to run a grift together, and it's something they're really good at. and it's something they enjoy, and it's something that attracts them to each other. It's in some ways it's foundational to their romantic relationship.
Right.
But as you sort of get older, and this is one of the things I think they are struggling, or particularly Jerry is struggling with, is you got to grow up at some point. You can't run the grift forever, and you can't run the grift and build a family once there's a child involved. And in a certain way, I think Owen and I have talked about this. We sort of see it as a metaphor for what we do, in the sense that, like, you start off and you're just like you're a young artist, and you're sort of pursuing your dreams without respect for any of the collateral damage it's inflicting on people around you. And then you get settled down, and you have children, and you have other people dependent on you, and you sort of got to grow up. And so this is a story about in some ways about Jerry, growing into his role as a responsible adult. It's just that instead of him, he doesn't want to be a poet or a painter. He wants to be a con man. And it's how do you navigate the tension between the thing you love and are good at, and the thing you need to do to be a responsible human being.
And what's more, I mean, the romantic heat between them has been very dependent on this idea that they run grifts together. And for Michelle, I mean, one of the things that she has to figure out is, am I still in love with Jerry if he's not doing the thing that made me love him? Right? What can we build that's new? And I think that's the whole project is very heightened, but as a metaphor, that really fits with a lot of different things in a lot of different people's lives, because your circumstances change, and you have to figure out if the old way of living works, and if the new way that it seems like you're going to have to live works, and what sort of changes you have to make. And but it's all in the context of people chasing each other and pulling scams and trickery and all kinds of shenanigans.
Yeah. I liked what you said at the beginning of that, Owen, that like Jerry's not what he seems, but I feel like that's every character in this story in the best way. Like everybody is very multifaceted. When we first meet Michelle, we just assume she's been swept up into the whole thing, and then you find out that's not really the case at all. And I feel like that's been happening. That happens with, like I said, all the characters. So as the series is going on, I'm interested to see who else has a secret second or third side to who they are.
Yeah, when I was talking about this,
Spoiler, all of them.
All of them.
That was totally what we were trying to do. I mean, everybody has a second identity.
No one's who they
Yeah.
seem.
Yeah.
Yeah, without revealing too much, it seems like Jerry has been very good at like getting himself out of out of the frying pan, but like into another frying pan, and then another frying pan, and like he's really good at getting out of the situation that he's in, but not like out of the
Never out of the fire.
woods.
Yeah.
So that's something we talk about a lot with his character. He's really good in the moment on his feet. He's very impulsive, and he really can't think more than 5 or 10 minutes ahead. certainly not
Right.
a week ahead. And that's one of the things that in his relationship with Michelle, she was a stabilizing force to provide that ability to think long term. And so he's just making snap decisions, which are really, really good at the moment, but then just wreak all of these consequences.
Like a Safdie Brothers character, like Uncut Gems or like Good Time,
Sure.
like really great at surviving like this second.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about the next second. And
Right.
Where you're going to be
That's right.
from now.
Yeah.
Right.
I would love to ask to wrap up, what is next for you? Are there more collaborations in the future? Do you have your own projects going on? I know that, you can't always talk about everything, but what's on your horizon?
The graphic novel that just came out encompasses the first half of this story. The comics issues 1 through 5. Issues 6 through 10 are going to be coming out later this year, and then those will be collected into the second graphic novel, the second part. That is, it's all written. It hasn't all been drawn yet, so we're sort of waiting for those drawings to come in. I'm not sure what else we should say about self-help. Owen, do you have a feeling about that?
We're working on it in another medium. seems very promising, and we're very excited about it. We can't say too much. It's like, I guess that's what they call vague booking.
Yes.
But we're excited about that if it works out. And I mean, I think that we like the second half of the story even better than the first. Unfortunately, we weren't able to keep Marianna. She's so good, she's in demand. So we have a different artist who we also love. And I think the tone of the second half of the series, which is called Self-Help Lie Another Day. So it starts at 1 through 5 of that again. Is a wonderful artist named Antonio Fuso. He's also in Rome, I believe, and has a slightly different look, a little darker, and that fits with some of the consequences that the characters face in the second half of the book. And Jesse just finished his latest Clay Edison novel, I know, which is very exciting. Right.
So we're both still writing our own projects, which is great. I have a book that'll be coming out in November. Which just turned in. I'm starting the next book in this series that I collaborate on with my dad, which is a crime series set in Northern California. And I know Owen obviously had The Curator, which is a magnificent book, and everybody should read that. And is working on new stuff as well. So busy.
Yeah, Jesse, I think I just put a book that you wrote with your dad on the display that we have upstairs. We have a mystery display, and I pulled it. I had a whole huge stack, and I was like, oh, hey, I'm gonna talk to him in 10 minutes. Cool. And put it on the shelf.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, thank you both so much for coming to talk with us and sharing the book with us. I loved the first half, and I'm very excited to see where the second half goes.
Me as well. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
All right, listeners, it's your turn now. Please check out Self-Help. By the time you hear this, most certainly it'll be out in the world. So go to your favorite comic book store, independent bookstore, library, wherever you like to go for those things. Okay, it's time to close this chapter. We'll see you next time.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.